Okay, we are here with our next Dishing with Danny segment. So, Dishing with Danny, we are serving up the latest and greatest in what's happening in the Council for Exceptional Children. And CEC is the largest organization dedicated to cultivating, supporting, and empowering education professionals who work with individuals with disabilities every day. You can get more information on exceptionalchildren.org. And I am so excited because we're talking advocacy today. And we are here with the advocacy guru who I look up to because she knows everything about advocacy, policy, law, Congress. Her wealth of information just inspires me every day. So please welcome Kuna from CEC. She is our Senior Policy and Advocacy Advisor. Welcome, Kuna. Would you mind sharing? Oh, wait, hold on. We totally forgot. First, we have to talk about what we're dishing up. So what are you eating? What's in your dish?
We just finished a little afternoon snack of frosted mini wheats with whole milk, which is one of my favorite pick-me-up snacks.
Cereal is one of those things you can have like at any time. I love cereal.
Totally. It feels even like a little bit bad to not have it at breakfast. I'm like, I'm an adult. I can do what I want.
It's like that comfort. You can have it at any time. Anytime, not just breakfast. I have shameless plug. I am still in my classroom. And of course, like any teacher, I don't have anything other than my student snack bin to pick from. So I'm going to grab a granola bar. And this is, of course, we always have the snacks for the students and for the teachers too. This would be my second granola bar of the day because of course we never have time to eat. So I'm dishing up my granola bar. So Kuna, it's so good to be talking about advocacy with you. Can we start? Just tell us a little bit about you and about your role and what you do in CEC.
Sure. So I run the policy shop at CEC. So I'm the primary point person on in our policy coalitions, doing the drafting and dissemination of letters to the department, to correspondence to Capitol Hill. I do meetings with the department and with Capitol Hill. And then I also do some inward facing work with our membership around advocacy. So I work in close collaboration with CASE on our Special Ed Legislative Summit, which happens every July. Plug for that. And I do some informational webinars for members. And I draft the weekly Policy Insider to keep folks up to date on what's happening inside the Beltway, as we call it. So there's some policy work and then there's some advocacy work as well.
And sometime in between all that, you do find time to sleep, find time to spend with your family, some time for yourself.
Usually, but not always.
So what we're going to be talking about today is just around advocacy and how, anyone can be an advocate and some basics about it. So when we're thinking about advocacy, what do you find are the most effective strategies for advocacy?
Yeah, I think that when we're talking about advocacy that's coming from practitioners, right? It's the most effective thing to do, frankly, is to lean on what you know. So talk about your experiences, for example, in your classroom, Danny. Maybe bring in some examples of some experiences that your students may have experienced. I mean, help folks understand what is happening in their own state or district, right? You're bringing the connection, that relevant connection to their voting block, and be there to answer questions. I think, especially when we're talking about Capitol Hill, much less so, thankfully, for the Department of Education, but especially on Capitol Hill, we have staff with such a wide variety of knowledge and understanding of basic information about our public school systems. I wouldn't take for granted that anyone even knows the basics of IDEA, that everyone doesn't know that. And so really being there to be a resource to help them understand how the system works, how it's working in their district or state, and to answer any questions they may have.
Definitely bringing that personal connection. I find it really interesting that sometimes when we talk about our experiences in advocacy, a lot of times we bring especially when, for cells, when we're talking with our legislators and we throw out numbers and facts and figures, and a lot of times it's just, well, what does that all mean? When we put it together, what does it mean? So, we can easily say IDEA has not been funded for almost 47 years. But to put it in a perspective of experience, I have $75 that I get in a budget to spend for the entire year for my classroom. I think that makes the bigger connection, that experience of, well, here's what I really need for my students, and here's why I can't get it. And we have those experiences in the classroom that, what you're saying, that our legislators don't see, and we assume that they may know, but they don't.
Yeah,
So
I think that's exactly right. We talk about IDEA funding. It's very easy to detach from the real world experiences of IDEA funding. We talk about teacher shortages, but if you're not, if you're not in a school, you're not seeing what that means, right? So being able to say, I have a student who has an IEP within which it requires specific services, we don't have the people to carry out those services because of our shortages. And so that student isn't getting what he or she needs, right? Then it makes a lot more sense.
what do you find are the biggest barriers that people might come across when they're learning how to advocate?
Yeah, I think policy and advocacy are intimidating.
Mhm.
I think it's, when you think about going to Washington, D.C., talking to Congress, the first idea that's kind of conjured up is the partisanship, right? Or that these elected officials are kind of ranks above us, untouchable, right? And I think that turns a lot of people off. And when they realize that advocating has nothing to do with politics, you don't need to know anything about politics. You don't need to be an expert in legislative language. You don't need to ever look at bill text, right? That everything that what you hold as a practitioner is actually very different, but a very important piece of the puzzle that legislators need to know about in order to do their jobs effectively. And so I think the barrier is that people don't necessarily or naturally see a role for themselves in the process. But once they understand that you don't need to weigh in on the policy, on the politics, you don't need to draft the legislation or edit legislation, that it becomes a lot more accessible, understandable, and even fun, frankly.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting too, and I do hear this, I hear it a lot from teachers in when they say, but I'm just a teacher. And I think we need to break away from that just. You're not just a teacher, you are a teacher. And you have the experience and the knowledge of what goes on within your classroom, within your district, to take that and bring it to the next level. And what you were saying about the thought of advocacy, and that it can be a scary thing, but if you think about it at a more granular level, like what we do in our classroom for our students, we advocate for them every day with the services that they need, with goals and objectives that we're working towards. That's advocating. And if you take that of what you're doing here, and when you're comfortable there, and take it the next step, it's about taking baby steps. You don't have to go at Capitol Hill all at once. Sometimes it's just a little bit to get in there. But I think our teachers have that knowledge. You are a teacher, you know what you're talking about, and you're an advocate for your students every day. And I think that's important to know that. And, I know when I first had my first cells, and walking into the Capitol building, it's so overwhelming. And I was nervous as all get out. And my first meeting, I just sat and I listened, and I was afraid to say anything. And the more you talk with legislators, and the more you realize they're people, and they look to what you're saying for, and it boggles my mind when they're like, oh, do you have a copy of that? Can I take this with us? Can we take this information? Can I process this? Can I contact you for more questions? They want that information because they know that you're the expert, that you have that. And as teachers, we are teachers. We know this. We can do it. And I think
Yeah.
we need to tell ourselves that we've got this. We can do it.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And I just want to say, I think that that's what motivates me really is that there's the opportunity to connect the lines between the practice on the ground and policymakers, right? And I don't think there's a better example than this pandemic, right? It was educators and parents and, therapists and doctors and so on that were saying, hey, this is what's happening to the kids right now. This is what we need in order to recover, right? And we've seen billions and billions of dollars go into the public education system because of that feedback, right? So when you think about what is happening in your classroom in terms of reading recovery, in terms of mask wearing, in terms of health and hygiene, in terms of student mental health, those issues that you're dealing with every day, those are actually really hot button issues in policy right now. And policymakers are paying attention because of the feedback that they've gotten, right? So I find that really motivating, that there is a way to make a connection. Sometimes people kind of sit and twiddle their thumbs like, okay, this education law isn't going to be reauthorized anytime soon. What's the point in engaging? And I think there's a lot of value in engaging.
100%. And as we're approaching July, which is our Special Education Legislative Summit, we need those teacher voices. We need those teachers on Capitol Hill. Our experience goes beyond our classroom. So for us to really make a difference in what we're doing in the classroom, we need to get out of the classroom and make that difference. So we definitely want to make sure that we have teachers that are involved in cells. When that information comes out, I hope we have a lot of teachers that are registering, and just know that your voice is powerful. Your experiences are powerful, and look at your students. Our students are the driving force, but why we advocate, why we're motivated to make a difference. And that's what we do, right? We want to make a difference for our students and give them everything we possibly can in order to ensure their success. And advocating for them locally in the district, in your state, or federally on Capitol Hill is definitely, one way, because we're not just a teacher, we are teachers, and we got this and we can do it. So I'm super motivated. I can't wait for cells and the teacher voice, right? So we hope that, we got a lot of teachers there, and we're excited. We're excited for the next steps in education, especially as we're going through budgets and COVID and mental health. There's a lot of issues that.
Right. And I think you better understand that there will be questions about school. People really want to know what's going on. Education is it's a hot button issue right now. It's a top priority, and expect that people will be happy to see you, and we'll have a lot of questions about what's happening.
And we will have the answers. We will. Kuna, thank you so much for joining me with your cereal, and I'm going to have my granola bar, and we will advocate together and we'll keep going.
Great. Thanks for having me, Danny.